little mama don't dance here. My mama, Lyn Rowe, who can dance, is in studio. She was a ballroom dancer, the shortest one ever. Welcome, Lyn.
Hi there. How are you doing
I remember
today?
watching you in competition. You were very, very good. They didn't have Dancing with the Stars back then,
No.
but if they did, you probably would have won.
Oh, I don't think so.
Lyn Rowe, certified financial planner. Talking diversification, always like running my thoughts by CFPs such as Lyn. Now, Lyn, you know, because you and I worked together for so many years, you know that I have always approached asset allocation a little different or differently than so many other people in the biz.
Yes.
Because to say I'm a faint-hearted investor would be an understatement, because most of my life I worked with retirees and pre-retirees. And it's always better to be faint-hearted when you're right on the precipice of retirement or you're in retirement, because nobody ever gets mad at you if you don't lose or you don't make a fortune. When they get mad at you is when you lose a fortune.
Yes.
So I built my little bucket strategy around making sure that one had an adequate amount of relatively safe money. And where I've been criticized is they say, well, you're building way too conservative portfolio for too long. You only need 2 years of cash. And I took issue with that.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, Ray.
And so I pulled, where did I pull this from? Fidelity. So I pulled information from Fidelity, who, as you know, we had a relationship with for a number of years with a portfolio management and all that stuff, although that vanished eventually. A conservative portfolio, and Fidelity considered a conservative portfolio, short-term investments 30%, like short-term bonds, regular bonds 50%, foreign stock 6%, U.S. stock 14%, an 80-20 mix. I don't think anybody would dispute that is a conservative portfolio. Now, if you go back in time, the worst 5-year performance for a conservative portfolio, such as the one I just alluded to, minus 0.37%. Now, mind you, you're spending money out of that minus 0.37%. So in order to get the minus 0.37, you had to have some good years, you had to have some bad years. More bad than good, because your net was negative. So why I built it around a 5 to 7 year safe money strategy of some conservative mix, like the one that Fidelity has here, is because I don't want you to have to drain income from a declining portfolio ever, because that exacerbates the loss, or it exacerbates the problem. You have a lot of experience with this. What's your take and experience with actual clients?
Well, Ray, I couldn't agree with you more, because I had, as you know, several hundred clients who had either retired or were about to retire. And those clients were so grateful when we did those annual reviews to look at their portfolio compared to what they expected it to be based on what they were hearing in the media and what their friends were saying. So that's one of the reasons. I remember
meeting with you years back, and a client from, we'll just say it's a major company that you had a relationship with, doing retirement planning. And that person was like so thankful to you. You called me in and said, well, you know, you got to talk to this guy because he kind of invented this thing. And because this was right about the time the market was totally imploding in 2000. And they were saying all of our friends did it the other way, because there was somebody else, some other company that was involved with that particular firm for a number of years. And they were doing the old pie chart thing, asset allocation model, systematic withdrawal. And they were comparing their notes, this was like in 2003, to their friends who had lost something like 60–70% in an equity-driven portfolio. And I remember they had a big smile on their face, and you had a big smile on yours.
We used to get thank you cards.
Yeah?
Yeah, during the crash, we got thank you cards.
So why then did you transition from being this retirement guruette to long-term health care? Was it because your particular clients were retiring and retired and getting older, and you started to see, you know, their transition from healthy to not so healthy?
Well, I actually, as you recall, Ray, I believed in the long-term care concept of part of the planning process years before, and as a result of watching them go through that sort of thing, you're right, that made me a believer. And then of course having family in that situation made me an even bigger believer. But the point being that this is the thing in their 6 o'clock. This is what most planners...
Don't talk over my head. In their 6 o'clock?
Back here,
Okay, yeah. Okay, right behind them.
Behind them, yeah.
Okay, got
it's
it.
coming up fast on them and they don't know it, and when it hits, it's never at a good time.
It's like hitting you right at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right, 12 o'clock.
Okay, I got it, or 12 o'clock.
So they were, thankfully my clients were all protected, but I saw so many people who weren't, and planners just, they don't want to, so to speak, get their hands dirty in the insurance world. They just didn't want to do that because it wasn't sexy enough. And so, especially long-term care, let's face it, you have to talk to people about getting sick. Ooh.
You did that for, and still do, for advisors all around the country because you're right. It's not, they don't want to get their hands dirty necessarily. It's not the most financially rewarding thing that they do.
Yeah,
I mean, let's face it, calling it the way it is.
There's that.
And the liability and the risk today, if you don't bring this stuff up as an advisor, is absolutely huge because the data is in. If you've done your homework as an advisor and you call yourself a financial planner and you don't bring up post-retirement or pre-retirement healthcare issues, you run a humongous risk.
And I'll tell you something else, Ray, along with that, and I know a lot of advisors listen to you, a lot of them, I hear from them a lot of times, that say, you know, he's the best, so why shouldn't I listen? But the point being that they want to try to do it themselves sometimes, and it's not something you can dabble in. It's not something where you can just go get a quote from your favorite company. It doesn't work that way, because you put your clients in a box when you do that. If they're declined or they get any kind of rating, I mean, you've got them in a box they're not going to ever get out of. So before you start, call me. I'll be happy to help.
Important. Go to Lyn's website. I want you to come back for another segment because we'll talk more about this. But go to her website, iwantmyltc.net. iwantmyltc.net. And you know, you bring me personally into this. You always got to do that, don't you?
Well, hey, it's your show.
Even to this day, and I don't do advisory work anymore, so I have more time to study this stuff. There's so many nuances and products and so forth that advisors would need to stay on top of. And even products that exist today that aren't under the umbrella of insurance that you've reminded me about, that it's next to impossible. Especially if your advisor claims to be a money manager, an asset allocator, is going to meet with you regularly, a rebalancer, and all the other things that the advisor either does for you or claims to do for you. Now, they also have to be an expert in health care, health insurance, Medicare, Medigap, long-term care, all that stuff, which I think kind of explains why you do have this area now of specialization, because as smart as you are, you couldn't even fit all that stuff in your brain.
I would have been doing 24/7.
Now you do 22/7, because I know I get emails from you all the time.
He does.
All right, we'll come back with Lyn, and we're going to ask her what it takes to be a caregiver and why you don't want to be that person. Don't go away. It's the Ray Lucia Show.
If we want to, we can leave your friends behind.
Welcome back, folks. The Ray program, Ray Lucia here, along with Lyn Rowe, certified financial planner. If you have a question for Lyn on long-term health care, simply call 844-RAY-SHOW. But it's much better, I think, to go to her website and send her an email. iwantmyltc.net. She gets right back to everybody. She really and truly does. I know that because I shoot emails to her all the time. Lyn, thank you. We were talking about asset allocation. Before I get into the stuff that I know you want to talk about, but since this is my show, we're going to talk about the stuff that I want to talk about. One of the things that Jean Pastula, our good friend, talks about all the time is having long-term care as a part of one's retirement portfolio.
Correct.
Thinking of it as an asset in the retirement portfolio. Whether you use a linked benefits plan or use a traditional long-term care policy, because as you and I have discussed many times before, if you were to try to capitalize the cost of long-term care,
yes,
it's several $100,000 out of your portfolio.
Yes.
So if somebody's sitting on, you know, $600,000-800,000 and they've got to allocate a third of that for health care, long-term care expenditures, they've got an allocation into a dead asset class that's going to do nothing for them from an income perspective. You agree?
Exactly, exactly. You know, I see this all the time where people say, well, you know, what if I don't need it? If somebody has an investment portfolio and they could buy insurance that would guarantee that their portfolio would not lose, in the worst of times, 25–30%, how much would they pay for that insurance?
People buy put options all the time, right?
Thank you. Yes.
So you're essentially buying a put option, and you're going to win on that option 70% of the time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's exactly right. And so what we're doing is we're protecting that part of the portfolio. We're doing so much more, but certainly in the investment side, we're protecting that part of the portfolio.
I just gave you a really good idea to go out and pitch to all of your people. The put option on your portfolio, and it is absolutely true because 70%, that's what the statistics tell us, 70% of the population are going to need it, husbands and wives, add them up together, right? So the family nest egg will be affected. 70% of the families out there will be affected, your nest egg.
Yes.
So this is a way for you to buy a cheap put option. And how do you pay for it? Well, your financial advisor could probably do what I suggested in the first segment, which is just tweak your asset allocation. You may have heard what I was discussing, but by adding some alternative asset classes or some non-correlating investment, real estate, whatever the case may be, to your portfolio, if you got an extra 1/4%, 0.5% on that, you know, $800,000 portfolio is $4,000 a year, boom. You've paid for your long-term health care. You paid for your put option. You protected your portfolio.
Exactly right. I mean, it is part of the overall financial plan. It is not something apart from the financial plan. It's part of it.
Okay, last week we talked about being the designated caregiver.
Yes.
You know, in a family where you've got an individual that has the need for long-term care. The question is, how can you avoid being in that role? Because I think I was pretty crystal clear last week with you. I don't want to have to do that. I love my wife. I'll do anything for her. But I don't want to have the stress of having to care for her daily needs and still love her as a husband at the same time. Because once she goes from being my wife to being a burden, I don't know how I'm going to react.
Well, you bring up a good point, Ray. Once a family member starts to become a informal caregiver, if you will, that informal caregiver relationship is totally different. And you can't have it both ways. You can't bounce back and forth from daughter to caregiver to mom, or from wife to caregiver to husband, and vice versa. You can't do that. Once you're the caregiver, you're the caregiver. You suffer so many tremendously depressing kinds of things. Depression being one of them, anxiety being another, lack of sleep, resentment because people aren't able to help themselves, or they're not paying attention.
Me in my current life, lack of sleep, resentment. I got to go on the air every day. No, that's just kidding. But you're so right. And the last thing I want is to put my wife or my kids through that burdensome job of taking care of their invalid father.
And here's what people don't take into account, Ray. We talked about protecting the portfolio, but a lot of times, you know, and I hear it more from guys than ladies, I'll be honest, that, you know, I've got plenty of money, they can hire somebody. They won't do it. They won't do it. That family
who has plenty of money? I started doing the math on this one day.
I know.
And you know, you could have $2 million bucks, and that's a lot of money. But it's not plenty of money if you and your spouse end up needing care.
Exactly. I hear that from adult children all the time. We don't know where we're going to take it from, what we're going to do. But most of the time, I mean, literally most of the time, they will not take it out of the investments. They will kill themselves first. Wives will step up to the plate, husbands will step up to the plate and do it until they drop, almost literally. And then they drop mom or dad, or they can't get them off the floor, and then they call the kids, and that's the day that one of those kids' lives comes to a screeching halt. You know, here's my suggestion. If you think you are the designated caregiver in the family, first of all, oftentimes they don't tell you up front because it's not something they want to tell you. They expect you to be your caregiver, their caregiver. But the point being that if you know that you're the designated caregiver, then you can have a family meeting, you can discuss other alternatives, you can schedule an appointment with me. I'll help facilitate the conversation. We'll talk about it together and get it on the table so we can open doors and look at all the alternatives together. You can actually buy insurance on other family members. If your parents need long-term care insurance and they just don't have the wherewithal and you're thinking, you know what, I better do something, let's talk. Let's fit it into your budget because it's protecting your life. So there's so many alternatives to...
I was reading the other day, and a very, very well-read, well-heeled financial researcher. He's not an advisor, he's a researcher. And at one time he was kind of anti-reverse mortgage, but he's kind of changed his tune quite a bit, as I have. I've gone full...
A lot of people have had to.
And so in light of that, I start thinking about most retirees do have equity in their home.
Yes.
Many, I should say, have their home paid for. What's wrong with taking out a reverse mortgage line of credit, right? Where if you don't use the money, it doesn't really cost you anything. But if you need it for premiums to pay for long-term health care, you simply tap into the home equity a tiny bit at a time, $4,000 a year.
Yeah.
I mean, it could take you 25 years before that has any major impact on your home. But that way you get the reverse mortgage, and Lyn doesn't sell reverse mortgages.
Nope, sure
Maybe
don't.
we'll get a sponsor someday that does. But the point is, you get the reverse mortgage so that you can buy one of the most important insurance policies you never want to buy.
Yep.
Because I don't care how good she is, you've got to want this. You have to want this for your family. And you brought this up earlier. People that have experienced it in their own lives, they're quick to buy.
Yeah.
If you've never experienced it, it's a difficult move. Some do because they can sort of look into the future and see the impact, not only just financially, it's not just finance, it's emotional. And as you've brought up many times before, and I just talked about this with our sponsors from Always Best Care, who actually, go out and seek out the right care facilities and do these meetings and all that stuff. Yeah, very good. You should get to know them too. But they said the same thing that you have said. The caregiver's health goes down the tubes. And so if you want to maintain the kind of relationship that you need with the individual that needs care, and with your own family members, because there's a lot of stress associated not only with the care itself, but who's getting the money after that person's gone. They need to have long-term care insurance, no question.
Well, and as I've said before, Ray, if you've got 3 children, it's not going to be a third, a third, and a third when it comes time for you to need care. It's going to be 0, 0, and 100%. And it creates a wedge between the kids. There's resentment there. It goes on for so long, and long past your life expectancy. Those kids are still bickering about the fact that you weren't there when I needed your help with mom. So you don't want to do that to your kids.
I hadn't thought about that, but I'm going to be sitting up there in heaven. The last thing in the world I want is to look down upon my, my 4 kids and my 5 grandkids, and everybody's fighting because they don't like each other because something happened. It's either money, or it's the care, or the resentment, or whatever. Not that my kids would ever do that. My family's perfect. Did you know that?
Kids would ever do that, but
they
do.
check Lyn out online. She's got full picture. No, she's just go to iwantmyltc.net. iwantmyltc.net. It may be one of the most important financial moves you ever make for yourself, your immediate family members, your parents, your kids, your grandkids. I'll give out your number real quick just in case people are, they're challenged when it comes to the internet.
It's 877-270-3127.
Lyn Rowe, Certified Financial Planner.